You are listening to the Hemp Startup Journey. My name is Jason De Los Santos, co-founder of Spectrum Labs, a hemp extraction facility in Asheville, North Carolina. I'm sitting down with hemp entrepreneurs, scientists, and politicians willing to share their perspectives, lessons learned, and how we can make an impact on the hemp and cannabis industry for everyone. Brandon, thank you so much for joining me on the Hemp Startup Journey. How's your day going so far?
So far, so good, man.
Good. Well, super excited to talk with you. I know we're going back and forth a little bit, trying to figure out a good schedule. So I've been looking forward to this for a lot of different reasons. But I think before we get into all that, I always like to start by asking people about how they got into the cannabis industry, but even before then, what you do. So if you're at a gathering, or maybe when you were, right? I don't know how how your gatherings are going nowadays with the whole pandemic thing. You introduce yourself to someone. Somebody says like, "Oh, hey, Brandon, nice to meet you. What do you do?" How do you answer that?
Oh man, interesting question. In years past, the simple answer is I am a owner and operator of a cannabis dispensary and cultivation facility. However, that's kind of morphed and changed a bit as of late. I exited formally from the company I co-founded, Natural Selections Dispensary in Colorado, and we sold that to another operator and kind of relinquished that license. And our new journey is essentially looking for limited license opportunities essentially across the US, specifically in the retail cannabis space. So still a cannabis retailer. Now I'm just focused on newer opportunities.
Cool. Okay, great. Well, maybe if we get a chance, we can talk a little bit about that. And then what was your journey into cannabis? Because it seemed like you were not in this space for that long.
It's funny, the online bios, are certainly scrubbed and polished a bit, but my true journey is that I'd always been, going back to, late high school and college days, especially in my late teens, early 20s, I was a pretty heavy recreational consumer of cannabis. And we're talking, the very early 2000s. During that time, I attended University of Illinois. Cannabis was certainly a part of my journey and my friend group's journey through college. Upon graduation, I knew a couple of things. A, I needed a job. But B, beyond that, I think I was pretty sure I wanted to grow weed. Okay. So this is 2001, and bought my first house. And even prior to even buying my first house, I bought my two first grow lights from eBay at the time, and I bought some seeds from Amsterdam. So I was certain that I was going to be entering the as a hobby more than anything, and be able to provide myself with high quality product. That was my sort of main vision and journey, was to, hey, let me grow product in my basement, supply myself and my friends, and just sort of have that way, instead of dealing with sort of sketchy drug dealers and dealing with things of uncertain quality. Keep in mind, this is 2001, and I'm living in on the south side of Chicago, and there is certainly no medical laws, and recreational wasn't even a thought. So sort of living a double life, where I was working full time in corporate America, but my true passion was sort of coming home to my basement and being on the cultivation side, and just sort of immersing myself in all things cultivation. There were some very robust and active online forums that I kind of took part of. Took a couple trips out to Amsterdam and visited coffee shops to get genetics. Had a passion for just kind of growing and the science behind it, and also the fact that one of the things I love about the industry, there's a number of things I like, but one of the things I love about particularly cultivation is you really do get to see the fruits of your labor in real time. Like those hours that you're putting in every night in the basement will translate to much higher quality product, better yields, and not to mention just sort of the idea of sort of working with your hands and doing something tangible. I think we've gotten away from that, just as humans. So all that to say, like I developed a deep passion for cultivation. I did that off and on, kind of juggling this double life of being an underground cultivator and a corporate citizen in my day job for about 10 years. And then one day I just kind of woke up with an epiphany. I was like, you know what, I'm going to move. I'm leaving Illinois. I'm going to greener pastures. I'm going to a spot where the medical marijuana industry is thriving, and I can do this full time and make a go at it. So in 2010, I moved to Colorado, and that's kind of how the journey started.
When did Colorado legalize? What year was it?
So I think there was a, you know, Colorado was developed pretty interestingly. It was essentially the Wild West when I moved out here in 2010. This is pre-regulation. So there was a ton of storefront dispensaries that were just kind of popping up under the medical guise. It was very similar to the to the California early days where it was Wild West. And, folks would grow in their basement and be able to kind of bring their product to unregulated dispensaries. There's no such thing as a dispensary license at that point in time. And you'd be able to just kind of, pop into a dispensary and with a duffel bag and a couple pounds of, freshly grown product and live with thousands of dollars in cash. 2012, Colorado decided it was about time to regulate the market, both the medical and that's also when adult use sort of passed. And they put very robust sort of regulations in place, for the betterment of the industry as a whole, right? So now you just don't have dispensaries popping up on every corner. The things have to come from a licensed producer. They, instituted the sort of seed to sale program, and track and trace and making sure that all of the product is indeed coming from licensed cultivators. So I was kind of in Colorado for the inception of the industry as a whole. The full, Colorado was the first state to kind of implement these regulatory guardrails, and I was here at the ground floor for all of that. So yeah, that's just to give you a little bit of background. When I first moved out here, it was the Wild West, and the industry very, very quickly evolved into sort of what you're seeing now, where it's sort of fully regulated and all of the producers are compliant and all of the retailers are also fully compliant.
Right. What I always find so interesting about the cannabis and the hemp industry is that compared to other more traditional industries, people go to school, they get an education, they learn about that specific craft. And then so many people in their industries, they just have a passion for it and they just figure stuff out. Like you were saying, you go to forums, you visit, maybe in your case, farmers, and just, talk to people and just kind of learn stuff. And you've even won certain accolades, right, in the industry for growing certain strains, like just basically self-taught and through your network.
Yeah, no, again, it's another, sort of beauty of seeing an industry just kind of sprout from the ground up. It's almost been, there's very few times that a new industry sort of evolves out of nowhere. And I think we were lucky. A lot of the folks who were in similar positions to mine, where they were just kind of studying and learning and self-taught and doing these things in their basement, finally had a place where they can sort of move to, whether it's Colorado or California, some other states, but finally had a place where they could sort of utilize these talents, kind of showcase the talents and the breadth of knowledge that they have, and make a living doing so. There's, several of my peers who were doing the same things that I was in the late 90s and early 2000s, participating on these online forums and things. They're like, hey, I'm moving to Colorado and I'm setting up shop, and have seen tons of success from that. So I think it's been sort of a true success story to see folks kind of come out of the shadows and be able to kind of participate in the industry and kind of, again, in my case, some of the strains that I've developed and brought to Colorado have won awards and accolades. It's certainly been, it's, I guess, a success story and a story that's often not seen,
Yeah, absolutely. So let's transition there a little bit. So you're a board member of the Minority Cannabis Business Association, and I'm not sure how long you've been doing that, but you seem to be a prominent voice of that. So can you talk a little bit about the association and sort of its mission and what it's focused on?
Yeah. I got involved with the MCBA. I think it might have been, probably close to 4 or 5 years now. And it was. And from my end, I really wanted to let other people of color know that, hey, you can succeed in this industry. We're incredibly underrepresented for sure. And there's going to be, some huge roadblocks, particularly with folks of color and gaining, not only the sort of expertise, but particularly the financial resources needed to open and launch any sort of cannabis business. But I have been very successful in my career out here and very fortunate and a little lucky, but I definitely wanted to share my story and initially to help sort of inspire other folks to participate, people that were participating in what we called a legacy market, folks like me who were growing in their basement, 10 years prior and had a passion for the plant, or might have even been, selling, high-end marijuana at some point in time and want to transition to a dispensary owner. I want to let them know like, hey, you can do it. Lately, it's transitioned, and I guess I'll go back. The primary mission of the Minority Cannabis Business Association is to increase participation for Black and brown folks in the industry, period. People who have been disenfranchised by the war on drugs, and we're really heavily promoting these social equity programs, and the three pillars of which are community reinvestment. Our communities have been destroyed and frankly devastated by the impacts of the war on drugs. So there has to be some sort of financial component, and some of those tax revenues and dollars need to be directed back to these communities. So we have the community reinvestment piece. You have the criminal justice reform. You're seeing some big wins here where certain states have automatic expungements. Being arrested for a joint, being arrested for a quarter pound of marijuana should not be essentially a death sentence where you can't get a job in corporate America. So we need to see these criminal justice reform happen and happen immediately. You're seeing some strides there where certain states are adopting, once they adopt an adult use policy, also adopt a policy for automatic expungement. But we still have to make some strides, right? We still want to make sure people are still being thrown in jail for cannabis. So that's a second mission of the MCBA. And the third, and what I was initially focused on, is minority ownership and financial goals, and making sure that we see folks of color, if they're not owners and operators, that we see executives of color, that we see ancillary businesses that are being run by people of color, and that we use this opportunity as America's creating a brand new industry to create a better industry, not the exact same industry that you've seen where it's being dominated by corporate interests. So we only have one shot at this, and we need to make sure that we're doing it right. So that is essentially the mission of the MCBA is three-pronged. As the community reinvestment, criminal justice reform, and minority ownership and participation.
Okay. So this is outside of my level of expertise. So sorry if I ask you these really pedantic questions, but it's just so interesting. So on the third point, minority ownership, because you're trying to get more involvement, maybe education. How do you help to increase minority ownership? What kinds of things do you do to aid that?
Yeah. Frankly, it starts on the policy level. I think. Again, Colorado did a lot of things right as far as the regulation of cannabis. But one misstep since we were a state is we didn't necessarily recognize how the deck is stacked against minority operators. So as you're seeing these, states come online, so to speak, and you're seeing different municipalities and, locations and states sort of consider, the cannabis and how to license these businesses. We need to fight for equitable policies. I think what that means in practice is a lot of the states, particularly east of the Rockies, have a limited license game. So, you take a state like New York, if I'm not mistaken, their very first medical law had a handful of licenses that were available. And all of these licenses went to these companies that had humongous war chests and were able to kind of navigate that process and become and be awarded a license. I think a more fair regime would be a more fair licensing regime would be to open it up. Let's go, let's take a more free market approach. Let's not put caps or artificial caps on the amount of licenses that are being given out right now. Let's let the market sort of dictate and allow folks who have a passion, may have a bit of a nest egg, may have some connections, but may not have the sort of wherewithal in the war chest of these companies that, in some cases have billion-dollar valuations, right? That to allow some of these smaller players in. There's other sort of policies that we push for, whether it's exclusivity, sort of giving a limited window in which social equity operators or folks who've been disenfranchised can apply for these licenses without having direct competition from these other multi-state operators and larger companies. So there's a few different ways that you can kind of tackle the issue. There's no perfect policy yet. That's something that MCBA is working on currently is, we need to take the greatest hits from almost all of these states and figure out what is going to make really good policy moving forward. There's some pieces of Illinois legislation that are wonderfully crafted, and there's some that aren't. Same goes with New York's new law. So there's we want to try to take the greatest hits and sort of the the most meaningful and impactful sort of policy positions that are going to impact folks of color, and kind of make that commonplace as new states come online. So that's the bulk of our mission now is crafting good policy, crafting inclusive policy, and the third part of that is making sure that some of these smaller operators have the resources to actually stand up and operate a business. The wealth gap in the U.S. is continuing to increase. There's no stopping that. But we don't want to see that kind of trickle down into the cannabis space. We want to make sure that some of these smaller operators can, tap into state loan funds. At some point, if there's some federal movement, SBA loans, we need to sort of make sure that we can provide a sort of direct lending source or direct source of equity investment into these newly formed businesses. So it's a big lift and it's a lot of work, and we're making strides. But this battle is going to be continuing over the next decade, if not, I guess.
Right. Yeah, I always find it so interesting in states like I think Florida. There are a few licenses, and the companies have to be fully vertically integrated. Mm-hmm. So the whole farming, they have to manufacture, they have to retail, and if I remember correctly, there might only be less than a handful of companies in Florida. And some other states do it very similarly. So, the amount of money that you need, the amount of capital to create a company like that, and just to be able to even compete. Just curious, if you've ever spoken with a politician or someone that does policy as to why they do that, as opposed to your version, which I would be more keen to, is to just open it up. Whoever meets this criteria, right, you can apply. What's wrong with that?
Yeah, honestly, I think a lot of it was fear-driven policy. I think politicians as a whole typically are risk-averse. There's certainly exceptions to the rule, but when you're talking about a state, it's particularly in, like the case of Florida, which is in the South, probably a purplish state, there's going to be folks that are like, I'm okay with medical marijuana, but I don't want to open the floodgates. I don't want it next door to me. I don't want, we need to put some very, very strict guardrails on this. And I think, that's what you're seeing borne out is almost every licensee in the state of Florida at one point in time, those companies were trading at $65 million, extremely valuable companies for the selected. I think there's maybe 10 or 12 operators out there in the state. So yeah, I think from a politician standpoint, I think they underestimate the sort of political will to maybe open up licensing. I think there's certainly a lot of NIMBYism, especially when you're getting granular on the municipal and local politics level, where a city councilor is like, we can't just open the floodgates. We don't want our town to be another Denver. They typically throw Colorado under the bus there, where I'd argue that, hey, Colorado has great quality of life. We have so many small businesses that are thriving due to the industry, so many ancillary businesses, and the fact that we've all been able to kind of spread our wings and go nationwide. That's sort of a testament to the success of it. But politicians think otherwise. So I think it's just the risk averse nature of it, along with maybe the lobbying interest of some of these larger firms who like the limited license states. If you're having a ton of success winning licenses in these competitive processes and have a built-in market share, you want those policies to be implemented everywhere. You don't want a free market. So I think there's certainly probably some lobbying interest on the other end as well, around opening the floodgates. So yeah, again, it's an uphill battle. It's a fight that we're having every day, and we're trying to educate politicians on the merits of saying, hey, let's raise these caps at minimum. If you're going to have some license caps, let's make them extraordinarily high, right? Let's allow more operators instead of fewer operators. And if there's some consolidation in the industry, so be it. But I think, most folks would agree that they want more small business owners being able to own and operate these companies, as opposed to, buying product from, the 7 different dispensaries in your state. Better for the consumer, better for job creation. And I think it's just better for the overall health.
Mm-hmm. So that's speaking from the perspective of you as a business owner, someone in the cannabis industry. What about, are there roles that consumers can play in all this and social equity within cannabis, or maybe other businesses surrounding that? Is there something else that other people directly outside can help with?
Yeah. I mean, as with anything, just kind of being engaged around the issue is sort of key. If you're in one of these sort of limited license states and you're kind of like, dude, the quality of product here is trash, right? We need more operators. That is specifically due to the fact that these licenses are so limited. So, if you can get more folks engaged with the issue and especially boots on the ground, and lobby your local politicians, I think that's one step. And other municipalities and states where they may have more robust licensing, support your smaller operators, support these craft growers, support the operators of color. I do know that at some point in time there's going to be one of our collaborators is probably going to roll out an app that'll allow folks to be able to sort by women, Black, minority-owned businesses. So make sure that you kind of support them, because I mean, most of us could certainly use the support. And then become members of organizations like the MCBA, who are definitely fighting for better and more inclusive policy. And I think part of our mission and what we do and give back to the members is just kind of in turn keep them informed of what's happening on a state and local level, and let them know, like, hey, there's a new bill that's coming out in Georgia. It's not really looking that favorable. They're only going to have 3 cultivators. It's, while it might sound good on the face of it, it's, in the long run, it's not going to do much for equity and for allowing some of the smaller operators to even have a chance at licensure. So I think education and keeping your eyes on what's happening on a policy side is going to be key. And then supporting some of the smaller operators and some of the organizations that are trying to do this work.
Yeah, I wonder if part of this is a part of a perception issue. Do you have people that come up to you, people of color, that say like, "Oh, hey, Brandon, like you're someone that represents minority business owners in cannabis. Like maybe there's a chance for me." Like, is there that conversation? Because I wonder if some people think like, "Oh, well, like typically you don't see Black or Latino business owners in cannabis." Is that a thing that you hear?
Yeah, no, I do. And there is a lot of excitement around this movement. I mean, I think one of the last development was a pretty robust, on the face of it, social equity program in Illinois. They were licensing an additional 75 licenses, which is a decent amount. They could certainly be licensing more, but 76 for the state of Illinois was a big sort of step forward. And due to the scoring metric, they were essentially going to be reserved for social equity operators. There's no way for you to really compete if you weren't a social equity operator. Unfortunately, there was some hiccups with how it rolled out, and there was some concerns about how these licenses haven't officially been issued yet. But effectively, you had to have scored a perfect score on this application to even had a shot at a lottery. So there were some flaws there, and unfortunately for the program, I think the decision they included like veteran points. So in order to get a perfect score, you not only have to be a social equity operator, but you also have to be a veteran. So again, I think there might have been some strategic missteps in the program's rollout, but the excitement hasn't waned. And I used to hear, I'm from Chicago originally, so I used to hear from folks all the time, like, man, how can I get involved? Can you help me out with my application? Do you think we have a good shot? So I think the excitement around these policies are there. I think my concern is that reality just doesn't quite match up with the excitement, and the amount of folks who have interest in the cannabis space and want to be involved is not even close to being matched by the amount of licenses that are being given out and that minority cannabis operators are awarded. So we need to close that gap significantly. But yeah, the excitement is there, the interest is there. It's where we're falling short is the execution.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. So the image that I just got was almost like this fight of David versus Goliath. Goliath being politicians, current legislation, perception, history over the last 100 years or so. Like you, Brandon, you as the individual human being, like, why do you do this, right? Like you have a family, you have a business, like you could be doing anything else, right? But like you're choosing this sort of Sisyphus fight, like, going uphill constantly trying to fight these things that maybe some days you wake up and like, man, this is impossible. Why continue doing that?
As a business owner, like the business is a very rewarding business to be in. Like there is, again, I mentioned it before, but being at the ground floor and shaping U.S. history with a brand new industry. There's something exciting and rewarding about that every day. Getting out of the rat race and getting out of the, I want to call them shackles of corporate America, but being self-employed. I mean, things like that are incredibly rewarding on the business aspect. As far as the policy work that we're doing, you're absolutely right. Some days it is frustrating. Like there's, I don't love the incremental progress that we're making. Yeah, we're making some baby steps in certain states, and we're making bigger strides than others in some of these aspects of social equity, whether it's the community reinvestment piece and whether it's the criminal justice reform, where we're getting folks records expunged and getting them out of jail. But again, the minority ownership and representation and as a whole in the industry still far lags behind, and there's still a ton of work to be done. And I think maybe what drives me is the fact that, I can be part of the change effort. And even though we're having, 5 losses, if you do get 1 win, that could be, 30 extra Black and brown owned businesses, right? Like that could be helping to create generational wealth for some of these folks who are able to participate in this industry due to thoughtful policy. So, like some of these wins are incredibly important. And I don't necessarily, there's a few of us who are well positioned to kind of push this message forward, but I think I'm probably uniquely positioned in that I am an owner operator in the space and have, been successfully navigated it. And it's probably incumbent upon most operators of color to give back and kind of, just reach a hand back and try to help the next man. And I think the best way for us to do this is through wholesale policy change. So yeah, even though we're not making wins every day and making strides every day, the fight has to continue. There's still so much opportunity. We're just in a little over half the states right now have some sort of medical and or an adult use framework in place, but that still leaves more than a third or close to half that remain. So there's still a ton of progress that we can make. So we need to pick up these wins where we can.
Yeah, great. Well, I hope that you celebrate those wins whenever you get them, because obviously it's a whole bunch of work. Yeah. And I figure that's probably a good place to close up. So if someone wants to get a hold of you or reach out to you or maybe learn more about what you do, how would you recommend people go about that?
Yeah, you can check out. I'm pretty active on, with Minority Cannabis Business. So my email address is Brandon at Minority Cannabis. I'm sorry, it's Brandon B at minoritycannabis.org. And you can check out our website, become a member, and see what we're up to. But contacting me via that email or our website, www.minoritycannabis.org, is probably the best way.
Great. Awesome, Brandon. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate your time and for what you're doing. So keep it up, and hopefully we can reconnect again when you get the next win. We can talk about that.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me on, man. Appreciate the conversation.
Thank you.
Hey guys, and before you go, this is Jason from Spectrum Labs. Please be sure to visit us on the web at thespectrumlabs.com for any show notes and links discussed in the podcast. Also, remember to click the subscribe button wherever you may be listening from so you get notified when our next episode comes out. And tune in next show and have a fantastic day.